Hey guys, it's Sybil and welcome to the very long-awaited video. So today we're going to be diving into how I got into Imperial Business School, which is actually the university that ranked second in this year's QS Global Rankings. And specifically, I'm doing the Masters of Strategic Marketing. I'll be covering everything from my application background, timeline, to all the key components of a good application. So think the GRE, TOEFL, CVs, essays, everything. So let's get into it. So a quick background check. I graduated from university in June of 2023 with a degree in international affairs. And my final GPA was a 3.94 out of 4.3, just for reference. And after that, I took a gap year to really focus on my master's applications and to intern at Cartier. So while my degree was not directly related to business, a lot of my extracurriculars and internships were actually in the business field. However, I do want to mention that the cohort at Imperial is first, very international, and second, very diverse in background. I've met people in the business school who did engineering as an undergraduate major, politics, communications and media, and so much more. So no matter what you studied in undergrad, I definitely think you can give Imperial Business School a shot. We also have a great mix of fresh grads coming directly from their uni studies and people with full-time work experience. So no matter your experience level, you can definitely apply to Imperial. So next up, I want to talk about the application timeline. So once you've decided to pursue a master's, I think it's super important for you to really sit down and design a timeline and roadmap for your entire application process. So master's applications are often overwhelming because there is so much you need to get done. So make sure that you're staying organized to be on top of everything. So I'm going to be sharing my application timeline with you guys just as a reference. So in June of 2023, I started looking into master's programs to pick my target schools, which for me were Imperial and LSE. From July to August, I spent all of my time and energy just studying for and taking the GRE. Then in September, I also took the TOEFL and started drafting my personal essays and refining my CV. In October, I sent out my Imperial application, and after that, it was just months and months of waiting, refreshing my email every single day until I finally received my offer in January. So that was the end of my master's applications journey. Next up, we're going to be talking about the GRE and the GMAT. So a key question that comes up for many business school applicants is it really necessary for me to take the GRE or the GMAT? Now, my advice to you would be first, definitely check out your target school's website to see if it's mandatory. And if they say that it's optional or it's recommended, in my personal opinion, I would say take the test. So the GRE and the GMAT are both not easy tests. They are exams that you really need to buckle down and study for. But if you can get a good score or a great score on one of these exams, it can really show the admissions team that you have great learning capabilities. Especially if you're someone with little to no work experience, I think that taking the exam can definitely add those bonus points to your profile. So personally, I decided to take the GRE. And if you were to ask me why I chose the GRE over the GMAT, I would say it's because I'm more confident in my English abilities than my math or quantitative abilities. Definitely do your own research before you commit to an exam, but in very simple terms, I think that the key difference between the GRE and the GMAT is that the GRE has a harder verbal reasoning section or English section, and the GMAT has harder quant concepts or math problems. So with that in mind, you can really think about what your strong suit is and pick your exam accordingly. So my target score for the GRE was a 160 plus on both the verbal section and the quantitative section. And luckily, I was able to get to that target score on my very first try. If your goal is to get into a top UK business school like LBS, Imperial, or LSE, I would highly suggest that you also set a target score around 160 for the GRE to make sure that your score is competitive. If you're interested to know more about how I studied for the GRE to get a competitive score, I will have my entire GRE playlist linked up here in the cards, so check it out after this video. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about the English language exam. So this is normally the TOEFL or the IELTS. My number one hot tip for the English language exam is if you're someone who's planning on taking the GRE or the GMAT, take your TOEFL or IELTS immediately after your GRE or GMAT because in comparison, it will be a piece of cake. If you can master the verbal section on either the GRE or the GMAT, you definitely don't need to worry much about the language exam. So I actually got a 119 out of 120 on my TOEFL exam, and if you're someone who is currently studying for the TOEFL, I also have an entire playlist dedicated to this topic, so I will link it up here. Make sure you check it out. Next up, we have the CV. Now, my number one hot tip for the CV is that a lot of business schools will actually have their own CV template on their school website. So I know Imperial has this and LBS has this as well. So if you're someone who's not very confident about formatting your own CV, or you just want to play it super safe for your target schools, I definitely think you can go with the school's CV template. For me though, I actually didn't know Imperial had its own CV template when I was applying. So I ended up using my very own, but it was still a very traditional one-page black and white consulting style CV. So how I structured my CV was first I had a section on education, and following that I put down my work experiences where I included 3 of my previous experiences. After that was my leadership experiences, which also had 3 blocks. And lastly, I had an additional skills section that details my language skills, technical skills, and my certifications. And now we have my rapid fire top 3 CV writing tips. My first tip is, of course, quantify your experiences. I'm sure you've heard this before. If not, I'm sharing with you now. Numbers provide the missions team with concrete proof that you actually brought some sort of real impact to your work, your society, or whatever your experience was. Also, nowadays, schools and businesses love to read resumes with machines first before an admissions officer or hiring manager even comes into the picture. So make sure you're including numbers to pass that first selection stage. Tip number 2 is to have a clear and cohesive structure for all of your bullet points. So in the real world, hiring managers are spending less than 10 seconds on each resume they read, and that's obviously not a lot of time. Therefore, you want your resume to be as clear and easy to read as possible. So how I like to structure each of my bullet points is I'll start off with what I did, how I did it, and then what the result was. This structure is super simple and it makes the contents of your bullet points super easy to process. So I highly recommend it or following a similar template that gives the same effect. My last CV tip is to always double and triple check your CV. Now I know this sounds like a no-brainer, but it's super important. It has to be reiterated. Before you hand in your CV, make sure there are no spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes, formatting mistakes, because the second someone sees this on your resume, it immediately makes the whole thing look unprofessional. With this in mind, you always want to be super meticulous when you're writing your CV. And when you're done with it, have your friends read it, have your family members read it to make sure that there are no silly mistakes. And now let's discuss the elephant in the room, which is the personal statement. Now, this is arguably one of the hardest parts of a business application. At least for me, it was definitely the most time consuming. I am considering filming an entire video dedicated to the personal statement, including my tips and my entire writing process. So if that's something you're interested in, please comment down below to let me know. So when you're crafting your personal statement, it's super important to always be genuine. Sometimes we feel nothing but desperation because we want our dream schools to take us in. And what happens is a lot of applicants will start morphing their essays into this shape that they think their target schools are looking for. But what happens in this process is that you risk losing your own unique identity, and you're gonna end up with an essay that just blends in to thousands of others because everyone is thinking the same thing and writing about the same thing. While it's important to understand your target school's values and missions and incorporate that in your essay, it's also super key to tell your own unique story. So maybe your culture has influenced you in some way, or maybe a supervisor you met at work has changed your mindset for the better. Whatever it may be, just write your personal story in. Your personal statement is a great chance to show off who you are, your individuality, and I promise when you're being genuine in your essay, it makes it so much easier and natural to write, so always remember to stay true to yourself. The next thing I want to mention is when you're writing your personal statement, don't just write about your strengths, but talk about your weaknesses as well. Of course, the admissions team is looking for the most extraordinary and outstanding candidates for their master's program. But at the end of the day, everyone is pursuing a master's degree for the same reason, and that is to learn something new. Maybe you really need to master a certain skill to stay competitive in your job market, or maybe you're looking to expand your network. Whatever that is for you, make sure to write that in. Your personal statement isn't just a place for you to show off how great you are. It's also a place for you to convince the admissions team, hey, I need this program more than the next candidate, and here is why. Show the admissions team, I have this weakness, but I know that your degree or this program can help me overcome it. Moving on, we have the quantitative experience statement. Now, this is something that's very particular and specific to Imperial Business School. So Imperial is known to be a very tech and data-driven school. So it makes sense that they're asking business school applicants to show how much quantitative experience they have. Now, if you're coming from a liberal arts background, I know that it can be super intimidating to write a quantitative experience statement. But I'm here to tell you that you don't have to worry too much. So like I mentioned before, I studied international affairs in university. So I didn't come in to Imperial with like this very extensive, quantitative background. I had some exposure to softwares like JSP and SPSS, but that was about it for my quantitative experience. So how I bridged this gap was in my personal statement, I talked a lot about how much I wanted to enhance my analytical skills. And Imperial, being a very data-driven school, was the perfect setting for me to do that. So if you're someone coming from a similar background as me, I highly suggest you guys do something similar. Just highlight in your personal statement how much you want to refine your data skills, your analysis skills, and you will be just fine. So now we're going to be talking about references. Now, Imperial, like many other top business schools, requires you to submit 2 references with your application. This can either be 2 academic referees or 1 academic and 1 professional. And for me, I decided to go with 1 academic and 1 professional just because I felt like it showcased my business skill set a bit better. When you're picking your referees, you want to make sure that they have experience or some sort of accomplishment in the field you're trying to break into. So since my program is in strategic marketing, my academic referee was my marketing management professor from university, and my professional referee was actually my supervisor from a previous marketing project management internship. It's also crucial that the referees you pick really know you personally so that they can give those intimate anecdotes about you that can really add bonus points to your application. Another thing to keep in mind is if you can select 2 or more referees, you want to be very strategic about how each referee can provide a very different perspective about who you are. It's more advantageous if your referees can talk about different strong suits that you have so that you're diversifying the characteristics being highlighted within your application. I started contacting my referees about 2 months before my application deadline, and you always want to give your referee ample time to develop their references for you. Make sure the process is as easy on them as possible. Make sure that you're replying to them in a timely and polite manner so that they can give you the most glowing review possible. Last but not least, we have the interview. So after your documents pass the first stage, Imperial will invite you to a 15 to 20 minute video interview. So you definitely want to do some practice before this interview. And I would suggest you think about what type of questions the school will want to ask you. So maybe some questions related to your motivation on applying to business school. Maybe they'll want to know why you chose this particular program, or maybe some career trends or challenges in your field. Practice answering these questions out loud, or even better, do it in front of a mirror. And don't worry too much if you stumble on a word or if you suddenly stutter, because Imperial does say that they're just looking for a very natural response. So keep your cool and just stay confident and speak your truth. I do want to mention that the Imperial interview actually includes one written question, and they tell you this in your interview invite. So when I saw this, I was kind of shocked because I didn't know what to expect. But all I can say is make sure you practice your typing speed so you can get as much of your ideas out on the screen in the set amount of time. So that is it for today's video, and I've been filming for about 2 hours now, and my voice is almost completely gone, but I wanted to put as much information as I could into this video for you guys because I know how stressful it is to be a business school applicant, and I want to provide as much help to you guys as I possibly can. If you found this video helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to stick around for all the upcoming master's content. And with that said, I'm wishing you guys all the best on your ongoing and upcoming master's applications, and I will see you guys in the next one.